Touching stories. The maid's secret revealed. Single dad lifted her dress and froze in shock. Evan Cole had grown used to the sound of his own exhaustion. It lingered in his bones like a second heartbeat, tapping against his ribs each night as he lay awake listening to his 6-year-old son, Noah, wheeze in the next room. Asthma had stolen more than sleep from their household. It had stolen peace, patience, and any illusion that life would return to the simple rhythm it had before Evan's wife passed away. He told himself he was holding it together, still working construction during the day, still keeping a roof over their heads, but deep down he knew he was one frayed thread away from unraveling completely. That's why he placed the desperate ad. Not for a professional nanny, he couldn't afford one. Not for a licensed nurse, though he secretly wished for one. Just someone reliable, steady, someone who wouldn't bolt the first time Noah's chest tightened and his breath came in short, sharp gasps. 3 candidates had come and gone already. One ran after 2 hours. Another demanded hazard pay. The third didn't even show. By the end of the week, Evan was ready to give up his job and accept the hard truth. He would have to become a full-time caregiver. Then Harper Quinn knocked on his door. It was a Tuesday morning in late August. The ocean breeze carried salt into the neighborhood, rattling the half-loose shutters on Evan's porch. He expected another exhausted applicant with the usual polite smile and false confidence. Instead, he opened the door to a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of another century. She wore a charcoal dress that brushed against her ankles, the fabric heavy even in the 90-degree heat. A wool coat hung on her shoulders despite the weather, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe bun that revealed cheekbones sharp enough to suggest hunger or grief. Her green eyes scanned the porch, the street, and finally his face. "I'm Harper Quinn," she said softly, as though the name might dissolve if spoken too loudly. "You're looking for help with your son?" Her handshake was firm but trembling. Evan noticed the way she positioned herself near the front door, body angled like a runner waiting for the starting gun. It was an odd stance for someone supposedly seeking long hours with children. Yet there was something in her eyes that held him in place, an intensity, a familiarity with pain. For a moment he thought he was staring into a mirror. Noah coughed upstairs, a ragged, whistling sound that pulled Evan's attention away. Harper's expression changed instantly. Her shoulders, taut and braced, dropped a fraction. She recognized the noise. Without asking permission, she stepped past him and hurried toward the staircase. Evan followed, heart hammering, but before he reached the top, he heard her voice in a low, almost musical tone. "Breathe with me, sweetheart. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's perfect." By the time Evan reached Noah's room, Harper was kneeling beside the boy's bed, one hand resting gently on his back in exactly the spot a respiratory therapist had once shown Evan. Noah's frightened eyes softened under her calm rhythm. Within minutes, his breathing steadied, smoother than it had been in weeks. Harper's hand lingered 1 second longer before she smoothed her dress down, making sure it covered her to the ankles. "How did you know?" Evan began. "Experience," Harper interrupted. Her tone was clipped, final. She turned to the window as though the sunlight beyond it might swallow the conversation whole. That should have been enough for Evan. She'd helped his son, proven herself useful, but curiosity gnawed at him. Who wore wool in summer, who avoided chairs, avoided explanations, avoided eye contact whenever the world felt too loud. And why? When her dress snagged on the bathroom fixture that evening, did she flinch like she'd been burned? Evan reached to help without thinking. "Hold still, I've got it," he said, tugging gently at the trapped fabric. "Please don't lift my dress," Harper whispered. The words cracked out of her throat like a desperate prayer. Panic flooded her voice, not embarrassment. It was the kind of plea someone makes when revealing the truth might destroy them. But the damage was already done. The fabric pulled free, lifting just enough for Evan to see the glint of something unnatural. A shape at her ankle that wasn't bone or skin but metal. It vanished again as the hem fell back into place, yet the image branded itself into his mind. She froze, staring at him as if waiting for judgment. He opened his mouth, but no words came. How could he ask what he'd just seen without shattering the fragile trust that had begun to form? Noah's laughter from the hallway broke the silence, and Harper used it as her escape, hurrying past him with her coat pulled tight. That night after Noah was asleep, Evan sat alone at the kitchen table with the sound of waves crashing faintly against the shore. He thought about Harper's trembling handshake, the haunted look in her eyes, the way she had moved with precision when Noah needed help. She was more than a housekeeper, more than a grieving stranger. There was a story buried in the fabric of that long dress, a story she would do anything to keep hidden. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, Evan felt that her story was about to collide with his own in ways neither of them could control. The next morning dawned with the kind of brittle silence that comes before a storm. Evan awoke to the faint hum of Noah's nebulizer upstairs. Normally he would have jolted from bed in alarm, but today there was another sound, Harper's quiet voice guiding his son through the breathing exercises. Her words rose and fell like the tide, calm and certain, easing Noah into steadier rhythms. For the first time in weeks, Evan didn't sprint up the stairs in a panic. Instead, he stood in the hallway listening, realizing that the weight on his chest had lightened just a fraction. When he finally stepped into Noah's room, the scene stopped him cold. Noah was propped against his pillows, inhaler within reach, cheeks flushed but not frightened. Harper knelt beside him, the hem of her long dress spread across the carpet like a dark pool of fabric. Her hand rested on his back, her other hand holding the nebulizer tube steady. She looked utterly at home, as though she had spent years perfecting this simple act of reassurance. "You're doing great, buddy," Evan said, trying to keep the wonder out of his voice. Noah grinned weakly. "Harper says I'm stronger than a dragon when I breathe like this." Evan raised an eyebrow. "A dragon?" "Yes," Harper murmured, finally meeting his eyes, "because dragons know how to master fire, and breath is just fire in another form." Her explanation was strange, poetic, yet it worked. Noah beamed proudly, puffing another cloud from the nebulizer mask. Evan's skepticism wavered. This woman who flinched at slammed doors and refused to sit like a normal person somehow had his son believing he was a dragon, and his son was breathing easier because of it. After the treatment, Harper excused herself and drifted downstairs. Evan lingered long enough to tuck Noah in before following. He found Harper standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the empty street as if expecting something or someone to appear. She hadn't made coffee, hadn't touched the toast he'd left on the counter. Instead, she just stood there, motionless except for the rise and fall of her shoulders. "You can sit, you know," Evan said lightly, pulling out a chair. "The furniture won't break. I prefer standing." Her voice was quiet but firm, the kind that brooked no further questions. Evan studied her. She never seemed to relax. Even at meals, she perched on the edge of a chair for minutes at a time before springing back to her feet. She kept her coat on indoors as though the house might suddenly spit her out into the cold. Every movement hinted at a woman living by rules no one else could see. Rules of vanishing, he thought, always prepared to disappear. He decided to test the waters. "You knew exactly what to do for Noah, more than most doctors we've seen." Her jaw tightened. "I've cared for someone with breathing issues before." "Someone, that's all." Her eyes flicked to his, warning him not to push. The look carried so much pain it made Evan's throat ache. He recognized it because he carried the same look every time he thought about his wife. The rest of the week passed in that fragile rhythm. Harper worked tirelessly, cleaning, cooking simple meals, managing Noah's treatments with uncanny foresight. She adjusted humidity in his room before an attack even began, kept the rescue inhaler within arm's reach at all times, and coaxed Noah into laughter when medication made him irritable. She never once complained, never once faltered, but the strangeness remained. She never used the upstairs bathroom. She avoided personal questions. She refused to accept new clothes when Evan offered, insisting her long dresses were fine. On Friday evening, Evan returned home from a construction job to find Noah coloring at the kitchen table while Harper scrubbed dishes that were already spotless. She had washed the same plate 3 times, her movements mechanical, as if her mind was elsewhere. Noah looked up and whispered, She doesn't like sitting down, Daddy. She says chairs make her bones ache. Evan crouched beside his son. Does that seem strange to you? Noah shrugged. Lots of things are strange, but she makes the monsters in my chest go away, so I like her. That simple statement pierced through Evan. Whatever secrets Harper carried, Noah trusted her. And trust was a currency Evan couldn't dismiss, not when his son's life depended on it. Later that night, after Noah was asleep, Evan stepped out onto the porch. The sea air was thick with humidity, promising rain. He lit a cigarette out of habit, though he'd sworn he would quit after Jennifer's death. The flame briefly illuminated Harper standing at the end of the porch, coat still buttoned, gaze fixed on the streetlights. "You smoke?" she asked quietly. "Trying not to." "It's a bad idea," she said without looking at him. "Secondhand smoke can trigger attacks, even clothes that smell of it can make it harder for him." Evan extinguished it immediately, shame prickling his skin. "You're right." He hesitated before adding, "You talk like someone who's lived this before." Harper finally turned. The porch light caught the faint lines beneath her eyes, the pale cast of her skin. She looked both too young to carry so much grief and too old to believe in second chances. "I've seen what it does to children," she said softly. "Your child?" The question slipped out before he could stop himself. Something flickered across her face, pain, guilt, maybe both. "Good night, Mr. Cole," she murmured and disappeared inside before he could apologize. Evan leaned against the porch rail, watching the waves crash faintly in the distance. There was a story hidden in that woman, one carved from scars both visible and invisible. He didn't know why she'd chosen his doorstep, but he sensed that fate had tied her to his life and Noah's in ways he had yet to understand. What he did know was this: Harper Quinn wasn't simply a housekeeper. She was a woman bound by rules of survival, rules that kept her ready to vanish at any second. And Evan, against his better judgment, wanted to break every one of those rules just to see who she really was. By the second week, Evan had accepted two undeniable truths. Harper Quinn was the most competent caregiver Noah had ever had, and she was also the most mysterious. The paradox gnawed at him. Each time she anticipated one of Noah's attacks with almost supernatural accuracy, he felt gratitude so profound it made his chest ache. Yet each time she avoided the upstairs bathroom, stood during meals, or startled at the slam of a car door outside, suspicion coiled tighter inside him. The rules she lived by were not normal habits. They were rules of vanishing, strange disciplines that belonged to someone who expected pursuit, not someone who expected peace. It was a Wednesday evening when Evan finally noticed the extent of her rituals. Dinner had ended an hour earlier, though Harper hadn't eaten with them. She was rinsing a perfectly clean saucepan at the sink when Noah padded into the kitchen with his stuffed dragon in tow. "Harper," Noah asked sleepily, "why don't you ever sit at the table with us?" The question startled Evan as much as it seemed to startle her. She froze, water dripping from her fingers. For a long moment, the only sound was the steady drip-drip of the faucet. "Chairs make me restless," she said finally, drying her hands with mechanical precision. "I think better on my feet." Noah tilted his head, unconvinced. "Even dragons sit down sometimes." Evan stifled a smile at his son's innocent logic, but Harper's face had gone pale. She reached out, brushed Noah's hair back, and whispered, "Maybe one day." Then she ushered him toward the stairs before Evan could ask more. Later, when Evan locked up the house, he noticed Harper standing in the hallway near the front door, coat buttoned despite the lingering summer heat. She wasn't waiting to go anywhere. She was simply standing guard, eyes flicking between the windows and the street outside. The image burned into him, a sentry rather than a guest. "Harper," he said carefully, "this is your home too, at least while you're here. You don't need to keep watch like that." Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You don't know that." The words carried a weight he couldn't ignore, and when she finally went upstairs, he realized she hadn't once turned her back to the door. The next few days revealed more. Harper avoided the upstairs bathroom religiously. She would walk all the way to the powder room on the main floor, even when carrying Noah up for his nightly bath. One evening, curious, Evan asked if something was wrong with the plumbing upstairs. She flushed red and muttered something about preferring privacy, then vanished into her room with the wooden box she always carried. That box fascinated him. It wasn't large, just a simple, polished thing about the size of a lunch pail, but she guarded it like treasure. He'd glimpsed it once when she set it down too quickly. Inside were a small medical bracelet and a vial of clear liquid. The sight made his stomach twist. Insulin. Evan told himself it wasn't his business, but late at night, lying awake, he couldn't silence the questions. Who was the bracelet for? Why did Harper, who showed no signs of diabetes herself, keep insulin hidden? And why did her hands shake whenever she touched that box as though it contained both her grief and her guilt? On Saturday, Evan's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, stopped him on the porch. Her face was lined with concern. "I saw your housekeeper at the pharmacy," she said, lowering her voice. "She was picking up a prescription. The name on the bottle wasn't Quinn, it was Rourke." Evan's stomach dropped. "Are you sure? As sure as I am that I've lived 76 years. And Evan, she was buying heavy doses of insulin, enough for a child, not an adult." He muttered thanks and returned inside, his mind whirling. Another name, another lie. Harper Quinn, or was it Harper Rourke? Was not who she claimed to be. That evening he confronted her gently in the kitchen. She was once again scrubbing dishes that didn't need washing, her movements stiff and compulsive. "Why did the pharmacist call you Rourke?" he asked. Her shoulders sagged as if the invisible weight she carried had suddenly doubled. She didn't turn around. "Because it was my married name," she whispered. "What happened?" Her hand stilled on the dish. "After my daughter died, I couldn't bear to change it back." Evan froze. The word daughter sliced through him like broken glass. He'd suspected some kind of loss, but hearing it confirmed made his chest tighten. "The insulin," he said softly. "It wasn't for you, was it?" Her voice broke. "Her name was Leela, type 1 diabetes since she was 4. I learned everything, every dosage, every trick to keep her alive." Tears welled in her eyes, though she refused to face him. "She died 8 months ago, diabetic ketoacidosis. I tried to save her, but—" Her shoulders shook. "I failed her." Evan moved closer, wanting to comfort her, but she flinched like a wounded animal. "I still buy her insulin," she continued, her words rushing now, desperate. "I know it sounds insane, but I can't stop. Each month I tell myself maybe she's still out there, maybe I made a mistake, maybe she needs it." Evan's throat tightened. He thought of his own nights sitting beside Noah's bed, counting breaths, terrified that one might be his son's last. The thought of losing him was unthinkable. He couldn't imagine surviving it. Suddenly Harper's strangeness, her rituals, her vigilance, it all looked less like madness and more like grief carved into muscle memory. "You didn't fail her," he said gently. "You did everything you could." But she shook her head, finally turning to reveal her tear-streaked face. "You don't understand. Leela didn't just die. She died because of me, because of the life I was running from." Before Evan could ask what she meant, Noah's frightened voice carried down the stairs. "Dad, Harper, help!" They both rushed upward, hearts pounding. Noah was on the floor beside his overturned nightstand, gasping for air, his inhaler out of reach under the bed. Harper dropped instantly to her knees, dress pooling around her. "I can't reach it," Noah wheezed. His lips were starting to turn blue. Harper stretched, but her dress caught on the bed frame. As she tugged, the fabric lifted higher than before, revealing what Evan had only glimpsed once. Not skin, not bone, but gleaming metal and carbon fiber where her left leg should have been. The sight stunned him, but there was no time. Diving under the bed, Evan grabbed the inhaler and pressed it to his son's lips. 2 quick puffs, and within moments Noah's breathing steadied, his color returning. Harper cradled him close, whispering, "You're okay, sweetheart. Just breathe slowly." As Evan watched them, gratitude and shock collided inside him. Harper Quinn, or Harper Rourke, was not only a grieving mother, she was a survivor of something far darker. And Evan realized that whatever truth she carried, it was about to unravel whether either of them was ready or not. The house was quiet again, but not with the comfort of safety. It was the kind of silence that arrives after a storm, when everyone pretends the ground isn't still trembling. Evan had tucked Noah back into bed, promising him that the monsters in his chest were gone for the night. But as he descended the stairs, he knew the real monster wasn't asthma. It was the unanswered questions wrapped around the woman who had just saved his son. Again. In the kitchen, Harper stood rigid at the sink, both hands gripping the counter so tightly her knuckles blanched. The hem of her dress brushed against her prosthetic leg, the metal hidden once more, though not from Evan's memory. She had tried to smooth the fabric quickly, but the image was seared into his mind, carbon fiber and steel, a leg built by survival. "Harper," he said gently. Her back remained turned. "Don't ask. I have to. You can't expect me to see what I saw and just ignore it." Her shoulders hunched, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then, without looking at him, she whispered, "I should leave tonight. This was a mistake." "You're not leaving," Evan said firmly. "Not like this." Finally she turned, eyes wet, face pale. "If people find out about me, they'll start asking questions. They'll want to know how it happened, why I'm really here, what I'm running from, and when those questions come, danger follows." Her voice cracked on the word danger, and Evan realized this wasn't embarrassment. It was fear, the kind that doesn't fade with time. "Danger from who?" he pressed. Harper shook her head violently, as though shaking away the memory itself. "I can't." She stopped, swallowed, and started again. "I can't risk Noah. You saw what happened tonight. If those people find me here, if they think I've built a new life, they'll burn it all down. And I won't let your boy get caught in that crossfire." Evan stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Whatever you're afraid of, we'll face it together." For a heartbeat, she looked at him with an expression that made him believe she wanted to believe him. But then headlights swept across the kitchen window. A car had pulled into the driveway. Harper's face drained of color. "They found me." She bolted from the kitchen before Evan could stop her, coat flying behind her like a black sail. Upstairs, he heard drawers slamming, the frantic zip of a duffel bag. By the time he reached the hallway, she was at Noah's window, prying it open. "Harper, wait!" Evan hissed, but she was already climbing onto the ledge, prosthetic leg moving with surprising agility. In another second she was gone, descending the oak tree outside like someone who had rehearsed this escape 100 times. Downstairs, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Evan's pulse thundered. He opened it to find two men in dark suits, their expressions grim, their presence heavier than the humid night air. One flashed a badge too quickly for Evan to read. "Evening, sir. We're looking for a woman named Harper Rourke. We believe she may be staying here." Evan's mouth went dry. He forced his voice steady. "Don't know anyone by that name." The second man produced a photograph. Harper's face stared back at him, thinner, more frightened than the woman he knew, but unmistakable. She might be going by Quinn now. 5'6", auburn hair, green eyes, walks with a slight limp. Evan's heart hammered. He bought time with the only weapon he had, lies. "She worked here for a while, left yesterday." He said she found another position across town. The men studied him, their eyes sharp, searching for cracks. "She's dangerous," one said finally. "If she contacts you again, you need to call us immediately." They handed him a business card with only a number, no names, no agency. Then they left, their black sedan rumbling into the night. Evan stood in the doorway long after they were gone, the card burning in his palm. They hadn't been police. They hadn't been FBI. He didn't know who they were, but every instinct told him they were predators, not protectors. When he climbed back upstairs, the window was open, curtains stirring in the night breeze. On Noah's desk sat Harper's wooden box. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside lay a child's medical bracelet engraved with the name Leela Rourke, a tiny vial of insulin, and a folded note written in Harper's careful script. "Evan, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth. Leela wasn't taken by illness alone. She was caught in a war I never should have brought her into. My ex-husband, Lance, was a police officer with ties to dangerous people. When I tried to leave him, he threatened to hurt Leela. I ran, but he found us. The accident that took her life was meant for me. His partners blame me for his death. They'll never stop until I'm gone. I never meant to put you or Noah at risk. Please tell your son I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye." Evan sank into the desk chair, his mind reeling. Harper hadn't just been hiding a prosthetic limb or the grief of losing a child. She'd been hiding from men who believed she owed them blood. And now they knew she had been living here. He sat there until dawn, staring at the box, the bracelet, the note. Noah's voice startled him awake. "Daddy, where's Harper? She promised she'd always say goodbye." Evan's throat closed. He gathered his son in his arms, searching for words that wouldn't shatter him. She had to go, buddy. She had some problems to fix. Noah's eyes filled with tears. But she makes the monsters go away. Evan held him tighter, knowing the truth was too heavy for a child to carry. Harper had left, but her story wasn't finished. Not for her, not for Noah, and certainly not for him. Because deep down, Evan knew one thing with certainty. People who live by rules of vanishing don't vanish forever. They come back when the past refuses to let them rest. And Harper Quinn's past had just arrived on his doorstep. The days after Harper's disappearance dragged like weeks. Noah asked about her constantly, his small voice filled with a bewilderment that tore at Evan's heart. Each morning when he set up the nebulizer, Noah would glance at the doorway as if expecting Harper to appear with her steady hands and quiet instructions. Each night, when Evan tucked him into bed, Noah whispered, "She promised she'd say goodbye." Evan offered gentle lies. "She'll come back when she can, she just has some problems to fix." But the truth weighed heavier with each passing day. Evan had read the note over and over, the words burned into his memory. Lance Rourke, a corrupt cop, dangerous associates, an accident that wasn't an accident, a child lost, and now Harper living as a ghost, hunted by men who hid behind badges and black sedans. The wooden box remained on Evan's nightstand, a haunting presence he couldn't put away. The medical bracelet with the name Leela Rourke felt like a relic from another life, a life Harper still carried in her heart. Sometimes, late at night, Evan would run his thumb over the smooth surface of the insulin vial and wonder how anyone could survive losing a child and still find the strength to help another. But Noah was suffering without her. His attacks grew more frequent, his confidence waned. He grew clingier, asking Evan not to leave for work. The temporary caregivers Evan hired were kind but unprepared. They panicked at the first sign of wheezing, fumbling with inhalers as though they were bombs about to explode. Noah noticed their fear and mirrored it, spiraling into more dangerous episodes. One rainy Tuesday evening, as thunder rolled across the ocean, a soft knock came at the back door. Evan froze. Visitors at that hour meant trouble. He opened the door cautiously, and his heart nearly stopped. Harper stood there, drenched, shivering, her coat plastered to her frame. She looked thinner, paler, with shadows carved beneath her eyes, yet her green eyes were unmistakable. "I know I shouldn't be here," she whispered, voice raw, "but I couldn't stop thinking about Noah. How is he?" Before Evan could answer, Noah's voice piped up behind him. "Harper!" The boy's face lit up like a lantern. He sprinted forward and wrapped his arms around her waist. Harper bent awkwardly, clutching him close, tears spilling down her cheeks as she kissed the top of his head. "He's been asking for you every day," Evan said quietly, pulling her inside. "His breathing's gotten worse without you." Harper closed her eyes, pain flickering across her features. "I was afraid of that. Stress makes everything worse for kids like him." She glanced around nervously, scanning the windows and corners of the kitchen. "They came looking for me, didn't they?" Evan hesitated, then nodded. "Two men in suits. They said you were wanted for questioning. They handed me a card with no names, no agency." Harper let out a bitter laugh. "Lance's old partners. They think I killed him." Her voice trembled, but her eyes held steady on Evan's. "It was self-defense. He was trying to hurt Leela. The car accident," she broke off, shaking her head. "He died, and so did she. They'll never forgive me for that." Evan's chest tightened. He wanted to reach out to steady her, but he knew Harper wasn't ready for comfort. Instead, he said, "Then tell me everything. I want to understand what we're dealing with." "You don't," she whispered. "These men don't just question people, they erase them." "I don't care." Evan's voice rose, firmer than he intended. "You saved my son's life more than once. Whatever you've been through, you don't have to face it alone." For the first time since she arrived, Harper looked startled, not by fear, but by the suggestion of trust. So she told him. They sat at the kitchen table for over an hour while rain hammered against the windows. Harper's story spilled out in fragments, each piece darker than the last. Lance Rourke had been a decorated police officer, praised in the papers, respected by the community. But beneath the uniform, he was rotten. He took bribes from traffickers, laundered money for gangs, and silenced anyone who threatened his empire. When Harper discovered the truth, she confronted him. Lance laughed in her face, then promised that if she ever tried to leave or expose him, he would make Leela pay the price. So she stayed, swallowing her terror, believing she was protecting her daughter. But Lance grew more unstable, more violent. The day she fled, she drove straight toward an FBI field office with Leela in the back seat. Somehow Lance knew. Someone had tipped him off. "He found us in the parking lot," Harper said, her voice breaking. "There was a struggle. He grabbed the wheel while I was driving. We hit a tree. My leg was shattered so badly they had to amputate." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. Leela, she didn't survive. Tears blurred her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. Lance died too, but his partners never believed it was an accident. They said I lured him there, that I killed him. They want revenge, and they don't care who else gets hurt along the way. Evan listened in silence, his hands clenched on the table. When she finished, he reached across the distance between them and covered her trembling hand with his. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Harper looked at him, searching for judgment, but found only compassion. For the first time, her defenses cracked. "I thought I'd lost the ability to help anyone after Leela," she admitted. "But when I saw Noah struggling, I couldn't let it happen again. I thought maybe I could honor her by saving another child." "You already have," Evan said, "more times than I can count." Upstairs, a muffled cough broke the moment. Noah was stirring, his breath uneven. Harper rose instantly, already moving toward the stairs. Evan called after her. "Harper, if those men come back." She paused at the foot of the staircase, her hand on the banister. "Then we'll deal with it together," she said softly, echoing the promise he had once given her. She climbed the stairs, her long dress brushing the steps, and Evan followed, realizing something had shifted. Harper wasn't just a fugitive anymore. She was part of their lives, woven into the fragile fabric of their family. And no matter how dangerous her past was, Evan knew he wasn't ready to let her vanish again. Noah's cough deepened as Harper reached his room. By the time Evan caught up, she was already kneeling beside the boy's bed, one hand on his chest, her other hand moving the nebulizer into place. Her calm, sing-song voice filled the space. "Slow breaths, sweetheart, in through your nose, out through your mouth, just like the dragon we talked about." Noah clung to the mask, his eyes wide with panic, but Harper's rhythm coaxed him into steadier breaths. Within minutes, the wheezing eased, his shoulders relaxed, and color returned to his cheeks. Evan stood at the doorway, watching the scene with a mix of awe and grief. Harper looked so certain, so practiced, as if every nerve in her body had been trained to respond to a child in distress. He understood why now, Leela. That lost child had taught Harper every move, every instinct. She wasn't just helping Noah, she was keeping her daughter alive through each careful action. When Noah finally drifted back to sleep, Harper smoothed the blanket over him and lingered for a moment, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Her lips moved as though whispering to someone unseen, perhaps to Leela. Evan waited until they were back in the hallway before speaking. "You knew exactly what to do, better than most doctors I've met." Her expression tightened. "Because I've been there before, too many nights, too many emergencies." "Harper," he hesitated, then asked, "why keep it hidden, the leg, the name, the truth? I don't care about any of that, but why hide it from me?" She pulled her coat tighter around herself, eyes darting toward the window. "Because the truth invites questions, questions invite danger, and danger destroys families. I won't be the reason your boy loses his father." Evan's chest ached at the raw fear in her voice. He wanted to argue, to insist she wasn't a threat but a blessing. Instead, he followed her back downstairs in silence. The following days were uneasy. Harper remained in the house, but she moved like a shadow, always half prepared to vanish again. She cooked, cleaned, cared for Noah, yet her eyes stayed fixed on the windows, ears tuned to every car that passed on the street. Evan felt like he was living with someone both essential and temporary, a ghost who hadn't decided whether to linger. Then came Thursday evening. Evan arrived home from work to find Mrs. Delaney, his elderly neighbor, waiting on the porch again. Her face was grave. "I shouldn't meddle," she began, "but I saw something today." Evan's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Your housekeeper," she whispered. She was at the pharmacy again, but she didn't use the name Quinn. She used Rourke, and the pharmacist said she's been buying insulin for months, large doses. Evan nodded grimly. He already knew part of this story, but hearing it from someone else pressed the reality deeper. Harper wasn't simply a grieving mother. She was a grieving mother hiding in plain sight with a trail of false names and prescriptions. That night, after Noah was asleep, Evan confronted her. She was at the sink again, washing dishes that didn't need washing, her movements jerky. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Her hands stilled, water dripping from her fingers. "About what?" "About Rourke, about why you're buying insulin you don't use." She turned slowly, her eyes haunted. "I told you before, Leela, my daughter, I can't let go. Buying it makes me feel like maybe she still needs me. Maybe I didn't fail her completely." Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. "The name Rourke, that was my married name, Lance's name. I should have dropped it the moment he died, but I couldn't. It's all tied up together, Leela, the accident." Evan's throat tightened. He had buried Jennifer, his wife, and even now the smell of her perfume could bring him to his knees. He couldn't imagine losing a child on top of that. He understood the madness of clinging to rituals that made grief bearable. "You didn't fail her," he said softly. But Harper's eyes brimmed with tears. "I failed in every way. Leela is gone, Lance is gone, and the people who protected him, they're not gone. They're hunting me. If I stay here, I put you and Noah in their crosshairs." Before Evan could answer, a loud crash sounded upstairs. Noah's panicked voice followed, "Dad, Harper, help!" Both adults sprinted toward the stairs. Noah's room was chaos. The nightstand was overturned, his rescue inhaler rolled beneath the bed, and the boy sat gasping on the carpet, lips turning blue. Harper dropped instantly, dress pooling around her as she tried to reach under the bed. "I can't get it," Noah wheezed, clutching at his chest. Harper stretched farther, her prosthetic leg catching on the bed frame. The fabric of her dress hitched higher, revealing the gleam of metal and carbon fiber once more. This time Evan didn't hesitate. He dove from the other side, snatching the inhaler and pressing it into Noah's hand. 2 quick puffs, and within moments, color bloomed back into the boy's cheeks. His breathing steadied, his eyes fluttering closed in relief. Harper gathered him into her arms, whispering, "You're okay. Just breathe slow. I've got you." Evan knelt beside them, heart pounding. He glanced at Harper's exposed leg, the undeniable truth of it. She noticed his gaze and yanked her dress down, shame flashing across her face. When Noah was settled back in bed, Harper slipped from the room quickly, heading downstairs. Evan followed, unwilling to let the silence win this time. In the kitchen, she busied herself with tidying things that weren't out of place. Her hands shook. "Harper," Evan said softly. "Don't," she whispered. "I saw, and it doesn't change anything." Her back stiffened. "It changes everything if people know. They'll ask how it happened. And once that story surfaces, they'll find me. They'll find you. And Noah," he stepped closer. "You think hiding will save you? You've been running for months, years, and they still found you. Maybe it's time to stop running." Her eyes snapped to his, fierce and terrified all at once. "You don't know what you're saying. Lance's friends, they don't forgive, they don't forget. They'll tear apart anyone who stands near me, and I won't let your son become collateral." Evan held her gaze. "Then let me stand with you, at least this time. You won't be alone." For a heartbeat, she looked as though she might collapse into his arms, but then a pair of headlights cut across the window. A car pulled into the driveway. Harper froze, her face drained of color. "It's them," she whispered. Evan's pulse spiked as heavy footsteps approached the porch. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. This time there would be no easy lies. The doorbell's echo seemed to vibrate through the walls. Noah stirred upstairs, coughing lightly, but it was Harper who reacted first. Her body went rigid, her eyes widening with the terror of someone who knew exactly what kind of men stood outside. "They've found me," she whispered, backing away from the window as headlights swept across the living room. Evan's first instinct was to shield her, though his mind screamed at him that he didn't even know what kind of danger he was shielding her from. He reached for her arm, but she pulled back sharply. "You don't understand," she hissed. "If they see me here, they'll never leave you or Noah alone." The doorbell rang again, this time longer, harsher, demanding. A hard knock followed, rattling the frame. Evan swallowed, then squared his shoulders. "Stay upstairs with Noah," he said. "I'll handle them." "No," her whisper was fierce, her hand clutching his wrist. "They know who you are now. They'll use you to get to me." The pounding grew louder. Whoever was outside wasn't going away. Evan forced himself to breathe evenly. "If I don't answer, they'll just keep coming, or worse, break in. I can't let Noah see that." Harper's grip lingered a moment longer, then she let him go, her face pale as chalk. Evan opened the door. Two men stood on the porch, framed by the glow of the sedan's headlights behind them. Both wore dark suits, pressed and professional, but their expressions held none of the calm authority of real lawmen. The taller one flashed a badge too quickly for Evan to register. "Evening, Mr. Cole," he said smoothly, his tone practiced. "We're looking for a woman, Harper Rourke. We have reason to believe she may be staying here." Evan's heart hammered, but his voice came out steady. "Never heard of her." The shorter man stepped forward, holding out a photograph. Harper's face, younger and thinner, stared back at him. "She may be going by Quinn now. Auburn hair, green eyes, walks with a slight limp." Evan forced himself to look at the picture, then back at them. "Like I said, don't know her." The taller man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's funny. We have surveillance placing her at this address 3 weeks ago." Evan's stomach clenched. They knew they weren't here fishing, they were here confirming. He bought time with a half-truth. "She worked for me a while as a housekeeper, but she left yesterday, said she found another job across town." It was enough to make them hesitate. The shorter man narrowed his eyes. "Did she mention where?" "No." Evan shrugged. She kept to herself, didn't say much. The men exchanged a look. Then the taller one handed him a plain business card with only a phone number. "If she contacts you again, you call us immediately. She's dangerous, very dangerous." Without waiting for a reply, they turned and walked back to their car. The sedan idled for a long moment before rolling away into the night. Evan closed the door, his palms slick with sweat. He waited in silence for several minutes, listening to the retreating hum of the engine before finally climbing the stairs. Harper was gone. The window in Noah's room was open, the curtains swaying in the cool night breeze. On the desk sat her wooden box, carefully placed as though she had meant for him to find it. Evan opened it with shaking hands. Inside lay a tiny insulin vial, a child's medical bracelet engraved with Leela Rourke, and a folded note. "Evan, I'm sorry. Mia died because of me. Lance's friends blame me for his death, and they'll never stop until they've destroyed me. Please keep Noah safe. I never meant to bring danger to your door. Tell him I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye." Evan sat heavily in the desk chair, staring at the bracelet. The weight of her story pressed down on him like an ocean tide. She hadn't just been a grieving mother, she had been a fugitive running from men who had already tried to kill her, and now they knew she'd been here. Upstairs, Noah stirred. "Daddy." His small voice cracked the silence. "Where's Harper?" Evan swallowed the lump in his throat. "She had to go, buddy. She had grown-up problems to handle." Noah's face fell, but she promised. His lip trembled. She promised she'd say goodbye. Evan gathered him into his arms, holding him close. "I know, and I think she wanted to, but sometimes people leave because they think it's the only way to protect the ones they love." Noah sniffled. "She makes the monsters in my chest go away." Evan kissed the top of his head. "I know, and she helped you so much already. That doesn't go away just because she's not here tonight." But when Noah drifted back to sleep, Evan remained awake, staring out the open window. The night felt different now, charged with questions and threats. He knew Harper wasn't coming back, not tonight, but he also knew she wasn't gone forever, because ghosts don't leave behind their stories unless they want them found. And Harper Quinn, or Harper Rourke, had left him more than clues. She had left him the responsibility of a choice. Would he let her vanish like she always intended? Or would he chase the truth, no matter how dangerous it became? Evan already knew the answer, even if he couldn't admit it yet. The rain had returned by the time Harper came back into their lives. 2 weeks had passed since she vanished through Noah's window, leaving nothing behind but the wooden box and the echo of her promise unfulfilled. Evan had tried to keep Noah steady, to remind him of breathing exercises, to make jokes during treatments. But without Harper, everything felt forced. The boys' attacks came harder, faster, and each time Evan's chest clenched with the fear that he would fail where Harper had succeeded. So when the soft knock sounded on the back door that stormy Tuesday night, Evan's heart almost stopped. He opened it cautiously, and there she was. Harper looked like she had been carved from the storm itself. Rain plastered her auburn hair to her face, her coat sagged with water, and her eyes carried the hollow exhaustion of someone who had not slept in days. She stood shivering, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder as though she'd run all the way there. "I know I shouldn't be here," she whispered, voice trembling, "but I couldn't stop thinking about Noah. How is he?" Before Evan could answer, Noah's voice rang out from the hallway. "Harper!" The boy raced forward, dragon plush clutched in one hand, and wrapped his arms around her waist. Harper bent, clutching him tight, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "He's been asking for you every day," Evan said quietly, pulling her inside. "And his breathing's been worse without you." Harper closed her eyes, guilt flashing across her face. "I knew it. Stress makes everything worse for kids with asthma. I thought I was protecting you by leaving, but I only made it harder." Her gaze flicked toward the windows, scanning them like mirrors reflecting her past. "They came looking for me, didn't they?" Evan hesitated, then nodded. "Two men in suits. They knew your name, both of them, Rourke and Quinn." Harper's laugh was brittle. "Lance's friends, they'll never stop. They think I killed him." Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. "It wasn't murder. It was self-defense. He was going to hurt Leela. The crash had happened during the struggle." Her voice broke, a sob catching in her throat. "But they don't care. All they know is their partner's dead and someone has to pay. That someone is me." Evan studied her face. The rain had drawn deep shadows under her eyes, but her jaw was steady, determined. She wasn't just a fugitive. She was a survivor carrying the unbearable weight of her truth. "Then tell me everything," he said. "No," she shook her head. "If you know, you'll be a target too." "I already am," Evan said flatly. "They came to my house. They knew my name, my job. They'll be back whether I know the truth or not, so give me the whole picture." For the first time since he'd met her, Harper looked startled by his resolve. She studied him for a long moment, then dropped her duffel bag with a heavy sigh. "Lance Rourke was more than corrupt," she began. "He was a conduit. He took money from traffickers, laundered it through police charities, made deals with judges and prosecutors. Everyone owed him something or feared him enough to stay silent. When I discovered it, he told me if I opened my mouth, he'd make sure Leela never saw another sunrise." Her hands twisted together, trembling. "So I stayed. For years I stayed. Every time he shoved me against a wall or ripped through another lie, I told myself at least Leela was alive. But then he got worse. He started talking about using her as leverage, marrying her off to some associate's son when she was older. She was only 10. Evan's fists clenched at his sides. "That day I couldn't take it anymore," Harper whispered. "I packed a bag, grabbed Leela, and drove straight to the FBI field office. I thought I was saving her, but Lance had people there too. Someone warned him. He found us in the parking lot." She paused, swallowing. There was a struggle. "He yanked the steering wheel while I was driving. We hit a tree. My leg was destroyed, and Leela," her voice cracked like glass, "she was gone before the ambulance even arrived." Evan reached across the table, taking her trembling hands. She didn't pull away this time. "They called it an accident, but his partners claimed otherwise. They said I'd lured him there, killed him deliberately, and now they want blood." Silence settled between them, broken only by the storm outside. Evan finally spoke. "So you ran?" Harper nodded. "From city to city, name to name, buying insulin for a child who wasn't alive anymore, because pretending she still needed me was the only way I could keep breathing." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't blink them away. "When I saw Noah struggling, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could make up for what I lost, that helping him would keep Leela's memory alive. But instead, I've put you both in danger." Evan squeezed her hands. "You didn't put us in danger, they did, and if they come back, we won't face them alone." Her lips trembled. "You don't know what you're saying. They're capable of anything. Arson, murder, disappearing people. You stand beside me, you stand against all of them." "I don't care," Evan said. "I won't let you fight this alone, and I won't let Noah lose the only person who's managed to give him hope again." Harper stared at him, stunned, then whispered, "Why?" Evan thought of Noah's face lighting up at the sound of her name, of the way his son's breathing had steadied under her voice. He thought of the way Harper had carried her grief like armor, yet still bent down to comfort a boy who wasn't hers. "Because my son loves you," Evan said simply. "And because I think I might too." Her breath caught. She shook her head, disbelief flickering across her features, but before either of them could say more, a faint sound broke through the storm. A car engine, slow, deliberate, pulling into the driveway. Harper froze, color draining from her face. "They're here." Evan's pulse thundered as headlights cut across the windows. This time there would be no escape through the oak tree. This time the wolves had returned, and the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break inside his home. The sound of tires crunching on wet gravel made Evan's stomach knot. He moved toward the window, parting the curtain just enough to see through the rain-streaked glass. A black sedan sat idling in the driveway, its headlights glaring into the house like unblinking eyes. Another vehicle pulled up behind it, then a third. Harper stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, her duffel bag half-zipped, her face pale and resolute. "They found me for real this time," she whispered. "Not just the scouts, this is a hunt." Evan's instinct screamed to hide her, to protect Noah, to do anything except freeze in the glow of those headlights. "Go upstairs with Noah," he said firmly. "I'll handle this." She shook her head, panic and resolve warring in her eyes. "You don't understand. They'll tear this house apart, and if they find me here, then we give them something else to find." Evan interrupted, his mind already racing. "Evidence. Something that proves they're the ones hiding crimes, not you." Harper blinked, thrown off by the sudden shift. "What are you talking about?" "The paper trail you mentioned," Evan said. "The files Lance kept, the accounts he funneled money through, the people he was tied to. You said you tried to take it to the FBI before. We'll find it again. If they want to bury you, we make sure the world knows what they're really hiding." Her lips parted, trembling. "You can't just expose men like them. They control everything, police, lawyers, even federal contacts." "Then we go higher," Evan shot back. "We go public. If you're being hunted in the dark, shine a light so bright they can't touch you." Another car door slammed outside, then another. Heavy footsteps approached the porch. The rain drummed harder against the windows. Harper grabbed his arm, her fingers cold but strong. "You don't understand how deep this goes. Lance wasn't just dirty. He was part of a network, judges, prosecutors, agents. They all fed at the same trough. If you and Noah get caught in the middle." Evan gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I've already been caught in the middle. They came to my door once, remember? They knew my name, my job, my son. If we keep running, Noah will never be safe. But if we fight, if we gather enough evidence, we stand a chance." For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the rain and the pounding of their hearts. Finally, Harper nodded, her throat tight. "There is a trail. I kept pieces, documents, notes. I couldn't throw them away. They are hidden." "Where?" "In a storage unit under a different name. I've paid cash every month since the accident. Inside are Lance's old files. And my journals, everything I couldn't risk carrying with me." The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Evan pulled Harper toward the back of the house. "We can't get to that unit tonight, but we can buy time." "How?" she demanded. He picked up his phone and opened the camera. "By making sure if anything happens, the world knows who did it." He began recording, speaking steadily despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "If you're watching this, my name is Evan Cole. With me is Harper Rourke, also known as Harper Quinn. Her late husband, Lance Rourke, was a corrupt police officer tied to drug trafficking, money laundering, and multiple homicides. The men outside our house right now are his partners. They are not federal agents. They are criminals posing as law enforcement. If anything happens to us, know that Harper is innocent and these men are here to silence her." He handed the phone to Harper. "Send it everywhere, news outlets, watchdog groups, social media. If they are watching, then we make sure they are being watched too." Harper's fingers shook as she typed rapidly, uploading the video to every contact she had, every public feed she could access. Outside, fists pounded against the door, harder, angrier. "They won't expect this," Evan said grimly. "They're counting on secrecy." Her eyes flicked to his, "and when secrecy fails, they turn to violence." Before he could respond, the front door rattled under a heavy blow, then another. The wood groaned. "Upstairs," Evan said. "Get Noah. If they force their way in, we'll stall them here." Harper hesitated, torn between protecting the boy and standing her ground. But finally she nodded and bolted up the stairs, her prosthetic leg thudding against the steps. Evan moved to the living room, bracing himself as the door shook violently again. Then, just as he expected it to splinter, the pounding stopped. Silence fell. Evan's breath caught. Silence was worse than noise. It meant calculation. Moments later, a bullhorn crackled outside. A voice boomed through the rain. "Harper Rourke, you have 60 seconds to exit the building with your hands visible. If you do not comply, we are coming in." Evan's blood ran cold. Upstairs, he heard Noah cry out, frightened by the voice. Harper's low murmur tried to soothe him, but fear laced her words. Evan gritted his teeth. They had lit a fuse, and now the explosion was imminent. He raised his voice, loud enough for his phone, still recording, to capture every word. "We are unarmed civilians inside our home. Any forced entry or violence against us will be considered an attack on innocent people." Rain hammered the roof. The bullhorn repeated its warning. 30 seconds. Evan's mind raced. They needed more than recordings. They needed proof, something undeniable. Harper's storage unit might hold it, but reaching it now was impossible, unless... He remembered the journals she mentioned. If she'd written details, names, dates, even small fragments, those could be scanned, photographed, spread online. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that would break if the truth was made public. "Harper," he shouted toward the stairs, "do you have any of the journals here?" "Yes," she called back, "in my bag always. Bring them down." The bullhorn blared. 10 seconds. Harper appeared, clutching a worn notebook, her face taut with terror and defiance. Evan opened it, flipping through page after page of meticulous handwriting. Accounts of Lance's dealings, payments, threats. "This is it," he breathed. "This is how we fight back." The front door exploded inward, wood splintering as armed men surged into the house. Evan held the journal high, shouting above the chaos. "The world is watching." The door crashed inward, shards of wood scattering across the floor like shrapnel. 4 men stormed into the living room, their weapons drawn, faces hard beneath the shadows of the porch light. Rain poured through the open doorway, mingling with the sound of Noah's frightened cry upstairs. Evan instinctively stepped in front of Harper, journal clutched tight in his hand. "This is being recorded," he shouted, his voice ringing against the walls. "Every second of it is streaming online right now." The men froze for the briefest moment, glancing at one another. They hadn't expected a spectacle. They had expected silence and fear. "Turn it off," the leader barked, his pistol aimed squarely at Evan's chest. "It's already uploaded," Evan replied, forcing steel into his voice. "The world is watching. You kill us now, it won't be a secret, it'll be proof." Behind him, Harper held Noah close, whispering for him to stay quiet. Her eyes, though, were locked on the intruders with a mix of defiance and terror. The standoff stretched into a taut silence. Then headlights swept across the windows again. This time the sound of sirens followed, real ones, growing louder. The leader cursed under his breath. "We're out of time." The men began backing toward the door, their eyes still locked on Evan and Harper. "This isn't over," the leader spat. "You've made enemies you don't understand." Evan kept the camera trained on them until they disappeared into the storm, their sedans peeling away with screeching tires. He stood frozen for a long moment, his breath ragged, before lowering the phone. Harper sagged against the wall, clutching Noah so tightly the boy squeaked in protest. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They don't give up, ever." Evan nodded grimly. "Then we need to make sure next time we're ready." The following days were chaos. The video Evan had posted spread quickly, picked up by small news outlets, local bloggers, and finally national eyes. The sight of armed men storming into a single father's home, paired with Harper's trembling voice naming Lance Rourke, and his network ignited suspicion that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Calls came from reporters, watchdog organizations, even anonymous allies claiming to know pieces of the story. Most were cautious, afraid to poke too hard at a hornet's nest. But enough light had been shed that silence was no longer an option. It was during this whirlwind that Harper revealed more. One night, with Noah asleep, she pulled a second notebook from her duffel bag. This one was older, more worn, its pages lined with receipts taped into place, coded numbers, and names written in hurried scrawl. "This is what I couldn't throw away," she told Evan, sliding it across the table. "Lance thought he was invincible. He bragged. I wrote it all down." Evan flipped through, his construction-rough hands trembling over the fragile pages. Dates, addresses, wire transfer codes, evidence that hinted at far more than one man's corruption. It was a lattice of rot stretching into offices and courtrooms across the state. "If we scan these, spread them online with the right context," Evan began. Harper shook her head. "It's not enough. People like this know how to discredit evidence. They'll call it fabricated. They'll say I'm unstable, grieving, delusional. We need something bigger." "What?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Witnesses, survivors, people they hurt. If we can get even one other voice to stand beside mine, we stand a chance." Evan hesitated. "Do you know anyone who'd risk that?" Harper's silence was answer enough. Everyone else was either too scared or already gone. But the idea lodged itself in Evan's mind, refusing to leave. That weekend, the first of 4 events struck like hammer blows. The first came with the fire. A storage facility across town burned to the ground, flames devouring everything inside. The news called it an accident, a faulty electrical circuit, but Harper went pale when she saw the footage. "My unit," she whispered. "All of Lance's old files, gone." Evan clenched his jaw. It was no accident. They were cleaning up loose ends. The second event came the next day, a staged ambush. Evan and Harper were driving Noah home from a doctor's appointment when a truck swerved across the lane, forcing them onto the shoulder. 2 masked men jumped out, but before they could approach, a passing family car honked and pulled over. The men fled. Noah sobbed in the backseat, and Evan realized just how thin their margin of safety had become. The third event came in the form of betrayal. An old friend of Harper's, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, appeared suddenly at a diner where she and Evan were meeting a journalist. At first, Harper's face lit with cautious hope. But the moment she stepped outside to speak with him, unmarked sedans rolled past slowly, windows tinted too dark to see inside. She realized instantly she had been tracked. They fled before the ambush could spring. The fourth came with paper, not bullets. A letter arrived stamped with official insignia, a federal warrant for Harper's arrest. Except the dates were wrong, the judge's signature didn't match, and the seal was crooked. A forgery, but convincing enough to terrify. Each blow chipped away at Harper's fragile hope. Each one convinced her more that staying meant eventual ruin, but Evan refused to bend. "They're desperate," he said, voice hard. "That means we're close to something. They're scrambling to scare us before we find the piece that tears it all open." Harper looked at him, her green eyes weary but flickering with reluctant belief. "You talk like you've been fighting men like this your whole life." "I haven't," Evan admitted. "But I've spent every day since Jennifer died fighting to keep Noah alive, and I'm not about to stop now, not for him and not for you." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Harper reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "You don't even know what you're signing up for." "Yes, I do," Evan said. "I'm signing up for you." Her breath caught. She started to speak, but headlights flashed through the blinds again. Another car. This time, instead of panic, Evan felt something sharper, determination. The wolves weren't just knocking anymore. They were circling, desperate to strike before their secrets saw daylight. And Evan Cole had decided he wouldn't let them win. By the time the third week arrived, Evan no longer recognized his own life. His once quiet home in Blue Harbor had become a battleground, a place where ordinary rhythms, packing Noah's school lunch, hammering nails at job sites, watching the tide roll in at dusk, were constantly interrupted by shadows lurking outside and whispers of men in dark suits. Harper moved through the house like a taut wire, never relaxed, never trusting the silence. Noah, though comforted by her return, sensed the tension. His drawings had shifted from dragons and castles to cars with tinted windows and stick figures holding flashlights. Evan knew they couldn't go on this way. The ambushes, the fire, the fake warrant, All of it meant the enemy was tightening their grip. If they didn't strike back, they would be erased. It was Harper who suggested the unthinkable. "They want me silent," she said one evening as rain hammered the roof. "So let's do the opposite. Let's make noise so loud they can't bury it." Evan frowned. "Noise?" She pulled the old notebook closer. "Testimony, a live broadcast. If we record a detailed account, names, dates, the payments Lance collected, while those men are circling outside, it forces them into the light. If they try to storm in, they won't be silencing a ghost. They'll be silencing witnesses." Evan rubbed his jaw, his pulse quickening. "That's dangerous." Harper's eyes narrowed. "So is breathing in this house." The decision was made. The night of the siege came fast. 4 sedans pulled up around the property just after sunset. Men in suits fanned out across the lawn, their silhouettes sharp in the glow of headlights. This time there was no pretense of investigation. No badges flashed, no polite questions. Just force. Inside, Evan set up his phone on a tripod, angled so the living room. Its worn sofa, the family photos on the wall, Noah's toys scattered on the rug, became their stage. Harper sat stiffly in the chair beside him, the notebook open on her lap. He pressed record. "My name is Evan Cole," he began, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "This is Harper Rourke, also known as Harper Quinn. Tonight our home is surrounded by armed men tied to a corrupt police network led by her late husband, Lance Rourke. These men want her dead because she knows the truth." Harper lifted her gaze, her green eyes fierce despite the tremor in her hands. "Lance was no hero. He laundered money, trafficked drugs, and threatened the lives of anyone who stood in his way. When I tried to leave, he came after me and our daughter. The crash that killed her and took my leg wasn't an accident, it was a murder attempt. Lance died, but his partners blamed me. They've been hunting me ever since." Outside, the bullhorn crackled to life. "Harper Rourke, exit now or we're coming in." Evan didn't flinch. He leaned toward the camera. "You hear that? They're not police. They're criminals with guns pretending to enforce the law. We are unarmed civilians in our home. If they break in, it's not justice, it's an assassination." Harper's hands gripped the notebook so tightly the edges bent. For years, they've silenced witnesses. Judges, lawyers, even federal agents were on their payroll, but they didn't expect anyone to keep notes. I did. These pages hold names, payments, threats. If this video reaches the right people, maybe it can finally end. The bullhorn barked again. 30 seconds. Noah whimpered from the stairs, clutching his dragon plush. Harper's head snapped toward him, her composure cracking. Evan rose quickly, scooping the boy into his arms. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured. "We're making sure the monsters can't hurt us anymore." The boy nodded sleepily, trusting him. That trust ignited something hot in Evan's chest. He set Noah down with Harper and turned back to the camera. "To the people watching," he said, voice iron, "if anything happens here tonight, know this: we are being attacked for telling the truth. Share this video, spread it everywhere, make sure their darkness can't hide anymore." The front door shuddered under a heavy blow. The siege began. The door splintered, men storming inside with weapons raised. But instead of cowering, Evan shouted above the chaos, his voice captured by the camera. "The world is watching. You can't bury us." Harper held Noah close, clutching the notebook to her chest. The men hesitated, clearly unnerved by the bright red recording light on the phone. "Turn it off," one snarled. "It's already streamed," Harper shot back, her voice trembling but strong. "Do what you came to do, but know the evidence is out there." Then came the sound that changed everything: sirens, real ones slicing through the storm, growing louder by the second. The intruders stiffened. Their plan had relied on silence. Now the night was alive with flashing lights and approaching engines. Evan saw their leader falter. "We need to pull out," one muttered, but it was too late. A woman in a dark trench coat pushed through the broken door, flanked by uniformed officers. She held her badge high, voice cutting through the chaos. "FBI, drop your weapons." The men froze, caught between fight and flight. Real agents surged in behind her, disarming them one by one. Evan stood stunned, Noah crying into Harper's shoulder as order returned to his home. The woman approached, her gaze steady. "Mrs. Rourke." Harper swallowed, tightening her grip on the notebook. "Yes." "I'm Agent Sarah Mitchell," the woman said. "We've been investigating Lance's network for 2 years. Your testimony could be the key to bringing it all down." Harper's breath hitched. "How do I know you're real? How do I know this isn't another trick?" Agent Mitchell handed her a thick file folder. Inside were photographs, bank transfers, transcripts of wiretaps. "Because we have the rest of the puzzle. What we don't have is someone alive who can fit the pieces together. Until now." Evan exhaled slowly, the weight of weeks lifting. For the first time, hope didn't feel like a fragile illusion, but Harper's face told him she knew the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days after the siege blurred together. Evan's living room still bore scars from the night. Splintered wood at the doorway, glass shattered across the floor. Muddy footprints tracked through by men who'd nearly ended them. Yet despite the wreckage, a fragile sense of safety hovered there. For the first time since Harper had stepped into their lives, she wasn't planning an escape. She was planning a testimony. Agent Sarah Mitchell moved quickly. The morning after the raid, she returned with a small team, securing the house while Harper, pale and hollow-eyed, gave her first official statement. The agents recorded every detail: how Lance Rourke laundered drug money, the judges who signed off on bogus warrants, the prosecutors who looked away, the shell companies that paid out bribes. Harper read aloud from her notebook, her voice trembling but steady. Each name seemed to lift a weight off her chest and add it to the stack of evidence on the table. Evan stayed close, Noah perched on his lap, both listening to the cascade of corruption unfold. It was horrifying, but it was also clarifying. Harper wasn't just running from shadows, she was running from men with power and blood on their hands. And now, finally, she was pointing a light at them. Still, Harper's mistrust lingered. That night when the agents left, she paced the length of the living room, her coat clutched tight around her shoulders. "How do I know they won't betray me too?" Lance had friends everywhere. Judges, detectives, even FBI contacts. What if Mitchell's just another mask? Evan stepped into her path, forcing her to stop. "You saw what she brought you. Wiretaps, bank transfers, photos. That wasn't theater, that was evidence." Harper's green eyes shimmered with doubt. "Evidence can be faked. Trust is harder." "Then trust me," Evan said softly. "If Mitchell's lying, I'll know, and I won't let her touch you or Noah." For the first time, Harper didn't argue. She just nodded faintly, like someone clinging to the edge of belief. The following weeks tested that fragile trust. Harper was moved into protective custody for interviews. Agents escorted her to secure facilities, where she sat for hours under harsh fluorescent lights, recounting the same story from different angles, ensuring her testimony aligned with the growing mountain of evidence. Evan accompanied her whenever he could, leaving Noah with Mrs. Delaney. Each time he watched Harper's composure shift, her hands trembling as she recited the night of the crash, her shoulders stiff when asked about Lance's violence. And each time, when she looked like she might shatter, she found his eyes in the room and steadied. Late one evening, after a grueling session, Harper collapsed onto Evan's couch. She had finally abandoned her long dresses, wearing instead a pair of jeans and a soft sweatshirt. For the first time, her prosthetic was visible. She rested her hand on it, her face unreadable. "I used to hide it like it was shameful," she murmured. "But now I think of it as proof I survived." Evan sat beside her, careful not to crowd. "You're not broken, Harper. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." She let out a brittle laugh. "Strong enough to survive, maybe, but not strong enough to keep Leela alive." Evan shook his head. "You're human. You fought with everything you had. That's not failure, that's love." Her eyes filled, but this time with something softer. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I thought I'd lost the ability to love anyone again, but sitting here with you and Noah, I feel like remembering how to breathe." He wrapped his arm around her gently, and for the first time she didn't flinch. The legal machine churned on. Mitchell's team pieced together a case that grew larger every day. 17 names appeared on the indictment list: police officers, attorneys, business owners, even a judge. Harper's testimony was the keystone holding it all together. But the network fought back. Anonymous threats arrived by phone. Cars with tinted windows loitered at the end of the street. One evening, a brick shattered the front window with a note attached: "Silence or else." Evan patched the glass, but Harper's hands shook as she read the words. "They'll never stop." "Yes, they will," he said firmly, "because you're not alone this time and because now the real FBI is on your side." Agent Mitchell returned days later with good news. "Your testimony's holding," she told Harper. "The indictments are filed, trials will start within months, and until then you'll have full protection." Harper studied her warily. "And after, when the trials are over," Mitchell didn't sugarcoat it. "After, you'll still carry scars, but the people hunting you will be behind bars. That's as close to peace as the law can give." Harper exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of tension. For the first time, the future seemed possible. One night, weeks later, Evan found her standing on the back porch, watching the waves crash against the shore. She wore no coat, no disguise, just herself. "You should be asleep," he teased gently. She glanced back, her hair loose around her face. "I couldn't. The ocean reminds me of Leela. She used to say the tide was proof that nothing really leaves, it just comes back in a different way." Evan stepped beside her. "Then maybe she's still here, in every breath you help Noah take, in every truth you speak now." Harper blinked back tears. "You always know how to turn the ache into something bearable." He smiled faintly. "Not always, but with you I try." She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Thank you for believing me when I couldn't believe myself." Evan reached for her hand. This time she let him hold it. The fight wasn't finished, but something had shifted. Harper no longer lived by rules of vanishing. She stayed. She testified. She began slowly to trust that maybe she deserved more than survival. And for Evan, watching her stand taller each day, watching Noah breathe easier in her presence, one truth settled deeper than all the rest. They weren't just surviving together. They were becoming a family. The courthouse loomed like a fortress, its stone walls streaked with decades of salt air and rain. On the morning of Harper's first official testimony, Evan stood with her on the courthouse steps, Noah's small hand clutching his. A line of federal agents formed a protective wall, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. Harper's face was pale, but her spine was straight, her notebook clutched tightly against her chest. She wore no coat, no concealing dress, only a simple blouse and trousers. For the first time, her prosthetic leg was visible to the world. The cameras that flashed from the sidewalk caught it, and instead of hiding, she let them. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The trials had been split across multiple courtrooms, each one handling a different piece of Lance Rourke's corrupt web. But Harper's testimony was the centerpiece. Without her, the rest could crumble. When she took the stand, Evan sat in the gallery, Noah between them and Mrs. Delaney. His heart hammered as Harper raised her hand, swore the oath, and began to speak. At first, her voice was low, uncertain. She described Lance as he had once been, a decorated officer admired by the public. Then slowly she pulled back the curtain piece by piece. She recounted the bribes, the threats, the money funneled through charities. She read from her journals, listing dates and names, describing moments when Lance's temper snapped and she had to shield Leela from his rage. The courtroom was silent except for the scratching of pens. Even the defense attorneys leaned forward, listening. At one point, Harper faltered. The prosecutor had asked about the night of the crash. Her lips parted, but no words came. Evan leaned forward in his seat, silently willing her strength. Finally, she closed her eyes, steadied herself, and told the story. The struggle, Lance's hand ripping at the steering wheel, the tree looming in the headlights. Her voice cracked when she said Leela's name, but she didn't stop. By the time she finished, the courtroom was hushed in awe. Even the judge seemed to pause before speaking. "You may step down," the prosecutor said gently. As Harper left the stand, Evan caught her eye. She gave him the faintest nod, her gaze wet but resolute. The months that followed were grueling. Trial after trial consumed her days. 17 defendants, each one tied to the network Lance had once served. Some cases collapsed quickly under the weight of evidence. Others dragged on, fought bitterly by defense teams determined to discredit her. The attacks continued, too. Anonymous letters, threatening phone calls. Once a car followed her home from court until an FBI escort intervened. But Harper didn't run. She didn't vanish. She faced each day with a courage that surprised even herself. Evan and Noah became her anchor. Each night when she returned from court exhausted, Noah would crawl into her lap with his dragon plush and whisper, "You beat them today, didn't you?" And each time she would smile faintly and say, "One step closer, sweetheart." Noah's health improved too. With Harper's intuitive care, his attacks became less frequent, his confidence stronger. She taught him breathing techniques, 4-7-8 like the ocean tide, and celebrated each small victory. By spring, he was playing outside again, chasing soccer balls across the yard, his laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Evan watched it all unfold with a swelling mixture of pride and love. The woman who had once lived by rules of vanishing was now teaching his son how to stand tall. And in the quiet moments, when Harper's hand brushed his, when her head rested on his shoulder, he knew she was teaching him too. By summer, the trials concluded. 17 convictions, charges ranging from drug trafficking to conspiracy to murder. Headlines blared the collapse of a criminal empire that had rotted the justice system from within. And at the center of every article, every news broadcast, was Harper's name. The FBI provided her with protection, but they also provided something more: acknowledgement. She wasn't a fugitive anymore. She was a survivor who had exposed the truth. On the morning the last verdict was read, Harper stood outside the courthouse steps, reporters swarming, cameras flashing. She held her head high, answering questions with the calm of someone who had finally reclaimed her voice. When asked what she wanted most now, she didn't hesitate. A chance to live, to build a home again, and to honor my daughter by making sure no other family suffers the way we did. Evan stood beside her, Noah perched on his shoulders, both of them beaming. That fall, life shifted again. Noah's school held a family day, inviting parents to join their children in the classroom. Evan had always dreaded those events, knowing Noah's questions about why his mom wasn't there would hang in the air. But this year, Harper came with them. She sat at Noah's desk, helping him with art projects, her prosthetic leg visible under the table. Other children asked questions, some blunt, some curious. Harper answered them with grace. "It's not a robot leg," she said with a smile. "It's a survivor leg, proof you can keep going even after something tries to stop you." Noah beamed with pride, introducing her to his classmates as if she were a superhero. Evan's throat tightened watching it. For the first time since Jennifer's death, his son's family picture felt complete. One evening after Noah had gone to bed, Evan found Harper on the porch, watching the autumn sunset. She wore jeans and a light sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You know," she said softly, "I used to believe my life ended the night of the crash, but now I think it just changed direction." Evan leaned beside her. "Sometimes the hardest endings lead to the beginnings we never imagined." She turned to him, her green eyes bright with something fragile but strong. "Do you really believe I deserve a beginning after everything?" He cupped her face gently. "You don't just deserve one, you've earned it." She smiled then, small but radiant, and in that moment, Evan knew something with absolute certainty. The woman who had once begged him not to lift her dress, terrified of her scars, was no longer hiding. She was ready to live. Winter rolled into Blue Harbor with sharp winds and skies the color of steel. For the first time in years, Harper didn't view the season as a threat. She no longer measured her days by escape routes or aliases. Instead, she measured them by Noah's laughter drifting from the yard, the warm weight of a coffee mug in her hand, and the steady comfort of Evan's presence beside her. But healing was never a straight line. One evening in December, Harper startled awake from a dream so vivid she thought she'd been thrust back into the crash. The screech of tires, Lance's hand on the wheel, Leela's scream, it all came rushing back. She sat upright, trembling, her chest heaving. Evan stirred beside her, immediately alert. "Another one?" he whispered. Harper nodded, unable to speak. He reached for her hand, grounding her with the warmth of his touch. "You're here," he murmured. "You're safe, and you're not alone." Those words became her lifeline. Still, she worried, not for herself, but for the boy who had burrowed into her heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Noah." In January, Noah came home from school with a drawing folded carefully in his backpack. He laid it out on the kitchen table for Harper and Evan to see. It was a family portrait. Noah in the middle, Evan on one side, Harper on the other. Above them, in careful letters, he had written, "My family." Harper's throat tightened as she traced the childish lines of her own face. "You put me in the picture," she whispered. "Of course," Noah said simply, as though it were the most obvious truth in the world. "You're my mom now." The words cracked something open inside her. Tears blurred her vision as she pulled Noah into her arms, clutching him as though she could fold every broken piece of her heart into his small frame. Evan's eyes softened as he watched. "He's right, you know," he said quietly. "You've been his mom in every way that matters." For Harper, it was the first time she believed it could be true. By spring, Harper's name was no longer whispered in fear but spoken in gratitude. Survivors of other corrupt networks reached out to her, encouraged by her courage. She was invited to speak at a community forum about resilience. At first, she resisted, terrified of the spotlight, but Evan encouraged her. "You've carried your story like a burden," he told her. "Maybe it's time to carry it like a torch." So she did. She stood in front of a crowded hall, her prosthetic visible beneath her jeans, her voice steady as she told the truth, about Lance, about Leela, about survival. When she finished, the applause rose like a wave. People weren't looking at her scars, they were looking at her strength. Later, Evan found her in the wings, trembling with adrenaline. "I don't know if I can do that again," she admitted. He smiled. "That's the thing about courage. It doesn't mean you don't shake, it means you stand up anyway." But even as the world shifted, shadows lingered. One night in April, Evan came home late from a job site to find Harper on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself. She was staring at the horizon, the waves silver under the moon. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "They'll come back," she said softly. "Maybe not the same men, maybe not tomorrow, but someone will. Corruption doesn't die overnight. It hides, waits, changes its mask." Evan stepped closer. "And when it does, we'll face it together, like we always have." Harper looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Why do you keep saying we? You could have sent me away a dozen times, protected yourself and Noah. Why didn't you?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because you're not just part of this fight anymore. You're part of us." Her breath caught. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by running or fighting, but by belonging. That summer, Evan planned something he'd never imagined himself daring. On the anniversary of Harper's arrival at his door, he led her and Noah down to the beach at sunset. The tide rolled in gently, the air warm with salt and promise. Noah ran ahead, chasing gulls, while Evan and Harper walked slowly, hand in hand. "I used to think second chances were a myth," Harper said quietly, watching the boy dart across the sand. "But somehow I got one, you, him, this life." Evan stopped, turning to face her fully. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Her breath hitched. "Harper Quinn Rourke," he said, voice steady. "You came into our lives when we were drowning. You saved my son, you saved me, and I don't want to imagine a future without you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes, spilling freely as she pressed her hand to her mouth. "After everything I've dragged you into, you still want me." "Especially after everything," Evan said firmly. "Because you've survived things that would have destroyed most people, and you still have enough love left to heal us." She laughed through her tears, a sound filled with relief and joy. "Yes, God, yes." Noah came running back, sand clinging to his shoes. "What's happening? Are you getting married?" Evan grinned. "That's the plan, buddy." Noah's eyes widened. "Does that mean she's really my mom now?" Harper knelt, pulling him into her arms. "If you want me to be." The boy nodded solemnly. "I do." And in that moment, under a sky painted with stars, they became something more than survivors. They became a family. Harper stood on the porch that night, staring out at the horizon, Evan's arm around her waist and Noah asleep inside. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the urge to count escape routes or check for shadows. Instead, she felt the rhythm of belonging. And though the world outside was still imperfect, still dangerous, still filled with men who thrived on silence, Harper knew her own silence was broken forever. She would never vanish again. When Harper first appeared at Evan's door, cloaked in silence and fear, neither of them knew their lives were about to change forever. What began as a fragile arrangement between a desperate single father, a struggling child, and a mysterious woman grew into a journey of survival, truth, and love. Through 15 parts, we've watched Harper confront her past, Lance's corruption, the haunting memory of Leela, the scars of loss, and transform from a woman bound by rules of vanishing into someone who dared to stay. We've seen Evan evolve from a man drowning in grief into a partner who chose to fight for truth, no matter the risk. And we've seen Noah, once gasping under the weight of illness and fear, breathe easier in the safety of a family rebuilt from broken pieces. But this isn't just their story. It's a reminder for all of us. Life will hand us losses that seem impossible to carry. Scars, physical and emotional, may convince us we are unworthy of love or belonging. Shadows from the past may whisper that running is the only way forward. Yet Harper's journey shows something different. Survival is not the end. It can be the foundation of a new beginning. The lesson is simple but profound. The past may shape you, but it does not define you. Family can be chosen, trust can be rebuilt, and love can grow even from the ruins of tragedy. So as this story closes, remember this. Your scars do not make you broken. They make you proof that healing is possible. And sometimes, when you think your story is ending, it is only the first page of a new chapter.